So many of us have been taught that kindness can fix almost anything, that if we just love harder, give more, stay patient, and soften our words, the other person will eventually meet us in that space of tenderness. But when it comes to dealing with a narcissist, someone who thrives on control, manipulation, and draining your spirit, being nice doesn't transform them. In fact, it often fuels their behavior. So what actually creates change? Not in them, but in us. The power doesn't come from turning up the volume on our niceness. It comes from turning up the volume on our courage. We often mistake kindness for the highest form of strength. We're taught that if we just stay soft, patient, and endlessly forgiving, we can heal even the most broken relationships. And in many cases, kindness really can build bridges. But when you're dealing with someone who is deeply narcissistic, niceness is not only ineffective, it actually becomes ammunition in their hands. They take your compassion and bend it into permission. They take your patience and stretch it into exploitation. Suddenly, what you thought was generosity becomes the very rope they use to pull you deeper into their cycle of manipulation. And this is where the conversation about boundaries becomes so critical. Because boundaries are not walls to keep people out. They are doors and fences and lines that say, this is where I end and you begin. They are not acts of cruelty, and they are certainly not selfish. Boundaries are the clearest expression of self-respect you can offer yourself. And in the face of narcissism, they're not optional, they're essential. See, the thing about always being nice is that it communicates something dangerous to a narcissist. It tells them your compassion has no edges, that they can take and push and cross over, and you will still bend yourself backward to keep the peace. And for someone who feeds on control, that's an open invitation. They thrive in spaces where the rules are unspoken, where the limits are undefined. The less you say no, the more power they hold. Boundaries change the dynamic. They aren't about punishing the other person, they're about protecting your own well-being. Think about it this way. If you let someone walk into your home, take your food, and rearrange your furniture every day, eventually you'd start to feel resentful and powerless. But if you say, you're welcome in my home, but here are the rules. You don't take what's mine, and you don't rearrange what doesn't belong to you. You've reclaimed your space. The same is true emotionally. A boundary might sound like, I will not stay in conversations where I am being insulted. Or if you raise your voice, I will leave the room. It's not about controlling them, it's about controlling your own participation. The hardest part is that many of us carry guilt when we set boundaries, especially with people we love. We worry they'll see us as harsh or unkind. But here's the truth. Boundaries are the most loving thing you can do, both for yourself and for the relationship. Because without them, there's no room for authenticity. Without them, you are abandoning yourself in order to keep the other person comfortable. And when you abandon yourself long enough, resentment grows where love once lived. A narcissist will rarely applaud your boundaries. They may resist, manipulate, or even double down on their tactics to pull you back into compliance. But that doesn't mean you're doing something wrong. It means you're disrupting the pattern. Boundaries often feel uncomfortable at first, not because they're harmful, but because they're new. You're teaching yourself a different kind of courage, the courage to honor your own limits, even when someone else disapproves. And here's the most important shift. Boundaries don't guarantee the narcissist will change. In fact, most won't. But boundaries guarantee you will change. They pull you out of a powerless posture and into a position of agency. They remind you that you are not at the mercy of someone else's moods, demands, or manipulations. You have a say. You always have a say. Being endlessly nice will not transform a narcissist, but boundaries, clear, consistent, and brave will transform you. They will return you to yourself. They will help you stand firm in the truth that your kindness is valuable, but it is not infinite, and it is never meant to come at the cost of your dignity. When we're caught in the orbit of a narcissist, our natural instinct is often to explain, to justify, or to defend ourselves. We think, if I can just show them how much I care, or explain where I'm coming from, or point out the facts clearly enough, then maybe they'll finally understand me. It's such a deeply human impulse. We want to be seen. We want fairness. We want connection. But with a narcissist, debating or explaining becomes a trap. It's like pouring water into a bucket with a hole in it. No matter how much you give, it will never be enough. Narcissists thrive on conflict and control. The more energy you spend trying to prove yourself or convince them, the more you feed the cycle they've built. Every argument, every explanation, every defensive speech isn't actually communication to them, it's fuel. It shows them they still have access to your energy, your attention, your emotions. Even your frustration is a kind of nourishment. And that's the hard truth. With a narcissist, your emotional engagement, even in the form of arguing, keeps you hooked into their game. Detachment, then, is the radical alternative. It doesn't mean you stop caring about yourself or about truth. It doesn't mean you condone their behavior. It simply means you stop feeding the dynamic. You refuse to play the role they're expecting you to play. You step out of the ring instead of going round after round, bloody and exhausted, in a fight that will never have a winner. And detachment is not coldness. In fact, it's one of the most compassionate acts you can give yourself. When you detach, you're not saying you don't matter. You're saying, I matter too much to lose myself in this endless cycle. It's clarity. It's the decision to conserve your energy for what actually heals you, instead of pouring it into someone who has no intention of listening. Think of it like this. Imagine someone keeps handing you a rope and pulling you into a tug of war. Every time you pick it up, thinking maybe this time they'll stop pulling if you just explain yourself well enough. But they never stop. Detachment is when you finally set down the rope. You don't yank back. You don't scream. You just release it, and without you holding on, the game collapses. This doesn't mean detachment will be easy. In fact, it can feel deeply uncomfortable at first. Silence in the face of provocation may feel like weakness, but it's actually strength. Walking away instead of explaining yourself may feel like losing, but it's actually winning in the only way that matters, protecting your peace. A narcissist may escalate at first when you detach because you're disrupting their supply of attention. But with practice, you'll see that your calm, your refusal to enter the storm, is a power they cannot touch. Detachment also allows you to see the narcissist more clearly. When you stop over-explaining, you start noticing their patterns. You see how the goalposts always move, how the story always twists, how your feelings are dismissed. And instead of trying to convince them otherwise, you accept the reality. This is who they are. And that acceptance is not giving up. It's waking up. It's choosing to respond differently. One of the most liberating truths is this: you do not have to win the argument. You do not have to get the last word. You do not have to make them see what they refuse to see. Your peace is worth more than their validation. Your energy is worth more than their approval. Detachment reminds you that you don't need to prove your worth to someone who is invested in denying it. So while debating or defending yourself with a narcissist keeps you tangled in their control, detachment frees you. It breaks the loop. It creates space for healing, for clarity, and for reclaiming your voice. And the beautiful irony is this: when you stop engaging in the ways they expect, you finally start living in a way that honors your truth. One of the most painful realities of dealing with a narcissist is the way they make you question your own worth. It doesn't happen all at once. It's slow, almost invisible at first. A sarcastic comment here, a dismissive look there, the kind of backhanded compliment that leaves you second-guessing yourself. Over time, those small cuts add up. And suddenly you find yourself wondering if you're actually as valuable, as lovable, or as capable as you once believed. That's the exact strategy a narcissist uses to keep control. If they can chip away at your confidence, they can keep you small. But here's the truth that changes everything. Your worth is not up for negotiation. It cannot be given by someone else, and it cannot be taken away by them either. The only reason a narcissist's words or actions feel so heavy is because we begin to believe that their version of us is more real than our own. And that's the trap. We hand over our self-worth like it's something fragile that must be protected in someone else's hands, instead of realizing it was never theirs to hold in the first place. It is deeply human to want validation. Every one of us longs to be seen, affirmed, and cherished. There's nothing weak about that. It's how we're wired. But when the source of that validation is someone who thrives on control, we end up building our sense of self on shifting sand. The narcissist is never satisfied. One day you're too much, the next you're not enough. The rules keep changing and the finish line keeps moving. No matter how hard you try, the approval you're chasing always stays just out of reach. That's not because you're lacking, it's because the game was rigged from the start. The real shift begins when you stop looking to the narcissist for affirmation and start turning inward. It begins when you say, I don't need you to agree with my worth in order for it to be real. That shift is terrifying at first because it feels like walking without a safety net. For so long, you may have relied on their crumbs of approval, even when those crumbs came with pain attached. But the moment you begin to see your own value without their permission, you start to reclaim the power they've been draining from you all along. Self-worth isn't something you earn by being perfect, pleasing others, or working yourself to exhaustion. It's inherent. It's yours because you exist. And one of the most courageous acts you can take is to remind yourself daily, I am enough as I am, even if they refuse to see it. Every time you do that, you're reprogramming your heart to trust your own reflection instead of theirs. When you reclaim your worth, something powerful happens. You stop dancing for their approval. You stop bending and shrinking to fit the shape they demand. And in that stillness, you begin to hear your own voice again. The voice that says, I am capable, I am strong, I am deserving of love that does not require me to disappear. That voice was always there, buried under the noise of criticism and control. Your work is to keep choosing to listen to it. Of course, a narcissist will rarely applaud this shift. In fact, they may push harder, trying to convince you that you're selfish, cold, or ungrateful. But that's just the sound of someone losing their grip. Their resistance isn't proof that you're wrong, it's proof that you're changing. And the beauty of reclaiming your worth is that once you see it clearly, no one can convince you otherwise. Your worth is not a bargaining chip in someone else's power play. It's not something that shrinks or expands depending on how another person treats you. It's steady, it's whole. And when you root yourself in that truth, you become unshakable. That's the freedom a narcissist can never take away, the freedom of knowing who you are, no matter what they say. Healing after being entangled with a narcissist doesn't happen in one dramatic moment of clarity. It's not like you wake up one morning, declare your independence, and never feel the sting of their words or the pull of their manipulation again. Healing is quieter, slower, and far less linear. It's not a single choice, it's a practice. It's choosing yourself again and again, even on the days when it feels easier to fall back into old patterns. When you've spent a long time with someone who diminishes you, you almost forget what it feels like to be whole. You start to believe the version of yourself that they've reflected back to you, too sensitive, too dramatic, not good enough, always wrong. So healing begins with remembering who you are beneath all of that noise. It begins with reintroducing yourself to your own heart, your own voice, your own worth. And that takes courage, because sometimes that voice feels faint at first. Choosing yourself doesn't always look glamorous. Sometimes it looks like saying no to the phone call you know will end in criticism. Sometimes it looks like sitting in silence, letting yourself cry, and then reminding yourself that tears don't mean weakness, they mean release. Sometimes it looks like surrounding yourself with people who remind you of your strength, even when you can't feel it yet. Healing is about small, consistent choices that bring you back to yourself. One of the greatest lies a narcissist tells you is that you cannot survive without them. They weave a narrative that they are the only one who understands you, or that no one else will ever love you the way they do. And even though that love is full of conditions and control, you can find yourself clinging to it because the alternative feels like emptiness. But here's the truth. The emptiness you fear is actually space. And space is what allows new, healthier love, both from yourself and from others, to enter. Choosing yourself again and again is how you begin to fill that space with something real. It's important to understand that healing doesn't mean you'll never think of them again, or that you won't sometimes feel the urge to go back. Healing means that when those moments come, you remind yourself of why you left, of why you drew the boundary, of why your peace is worth protecting. Healing means you catch yourself before slipping into the old cycle, and you choose a different response. And every time you do that, even if it feels small, you're strengthening your ability to stand on your own. The beautiful thing about this process is that it's not just about breaking away from someone toxic. It's about building a deeper relationship with yourself. You begin to notice your own needs, honor your own limits, and celebrate your own growth. You start to feel joy in simple things again because you're no longer carrying the weight of constant criticism and control. And in that freedom, you find pieces of yourself you thought you had lost forever. Will the narcissist change because of your healing? Probably not. But here's the most empowering truth. They don't need to. The change isn't about them. It's about you stepping out of the role they cast for you and reclaiming the lead role in your own story. It's about writing a new narrative where your worth isn't questioned and your love isn't conditional. Choosing yourself is not a one-time decision. It's a daily practice. Some days you'll feel strong, other days you'll falter. That's okay. Healing is not measured by perfection, it's measured by persistence. And with each choice, each boundary, each moment of self-compassion, you build a life that no narcissist can diminish. That is the quiet, powerful revolution of healing, the consistent, courageous act of choosing yourself again and again until it becomes your natural way of living.